Good morning, folks. We are the MMA Sucka crew. My name is Tim Wheaton, and we are joined by the editor at MMA Sucka, Frazer Krohn. Frazer, what's going on, sir?
Yeah, I've been busy the last sort of 24 hours catching up on all things UFC 265. So ready to jump into it and break down the card. But
Definitely. Now,
I'm
UFC
relieved.
265 was an event that no one was really, I don't want to be rude. No one was really looking forward to this event. And I think we all came away from it kind of hyped. It ended up being kind of a good event. It built what they wanted to, which was a storyline going into the Ngannou fight. And they kind of got what they wanted out of this event. What did you think of the event as a whole?
On paper, like you say, I wasn't overly excited. There's a couple of matchups on there that I was excited for, but I think maybe we're comparing it to the last pay-per-view, which is a McGregor pay-per-view, which, you've got not only the fight week itself, not only the fight night itself, but the fight week as a whole.
Hmm.
Um, and I think there were a lot more questions going into the McGregor Poirier rematch or trilogy than there were going into Lewis Gane, because the fight on paper wasn't very well matched in favor of Lewis. Yes, he's the hometown guy. Yes, he's got the equalizer of the one punch knockout power, but Cyril Gane's just a better fighter. And in reality, that's what played out. So going into the fight week and going into the fight night, it's a bit of an instantly forgettable pay-per-view. But what played out, we got a lot of finishes, a lot of good performances, a lot of close matchups. And yeah, I was coming away from it now on reflection. It was a really good night for the UFC, I think. And with Gane winning, they got exactly what they wanted.
It is a good storyline going into the Ngannou fight, and we will get into that. We'll get into the title picture a little bit later, but let's talk about the fight itself. And both of us, of course, picked Cyril Gane on this one, and basically for the reason that, like you said, he is a better fighter overall, and that's kind of the long and short of it. He is simply a better fighter, and then in this fight, he showed that he is a better fighter. Derek Lewis, tracking his entire career, like he struggled with Matt Mitrione, he struggled with an old Mark Hunt, he struggled with an old Junior Dos Santos. He's certainly not an amazing fighter. And even he was being outstruck by Curtis Blades in their fight as well, quite handily. And Curtis Blades by no means is a striker. Derek Lewis is not a world beater, but like you said, he does have a right hand. He's essentially just a big power right hand, and that was his big shot in this fight. But there's not too much to break down. Cyril Gane used a lot of front leg kicks. He did constant distance control. He did constant cage control. He did a lot of fake jabs into low kicks, a lot of jabs to control the fight. Essentially, Cyril Gane played his game. We saw exactly what Cyril Gane can do in fights, and he played his game perfectly and absolutely outstruck Derek Lewis. What did you think of the fight?
I was, I'm echoing everything you're saying. I think Cyril Gane, occasionally, I think fighters can play their opponent's game too much and, look to be, how Bruce Lee said, be like water in there and sort of adapt to whatever. Cyril Gane didn't have to adapt because he went in there, he imposed his game and dominated from second one to the stoppage, which I think came, with a couple of seconds or a couple of maybe a minute left in the third round.
Mm-hmm.
More than anything, though, I was really disappointed in Derek Lewis. I thought it was not only Derek Lewis but his team. What was the game plan? You can't go into a big fight like this with a game plan of look to land a right hand. That's not. It's never going to work. Because Cyril Gane had. You can guarantee that him and his coaches worked on plan A, plan B, plan C, maybe even a plan D. Derek Lewis, plan A, land the right hand. Plan B, what
That's
what
it.
what was his game plan going in? You could see in the Alonzo Menifield fight, it was land the low kicks, absolutely bastard the leg of Ed Herman, and it almost got him the finish. The game plan for Derek Lewis going in should have been attack the legs. I think it's after the first round they were calling for Derek Lewis to try and fake the takedown. With the greatest respect, Cyril Gane is never going to truly believe that Derek Lewis is going to land the takedown. I'm not sure what his takedown average is in the UFC, Derek Lewis, but okay, his takedown average is 0.49 and his accuracy is 25% in the UFC. And that's through, a lot of Derek Lewis has had a lot of UFC fights, and for a 0.49 average, you know, Cyril Gane's never going to really fear the threat of a Derek Lewis takedown. I
Yeah.
think
He's gone for like
Was it
5 takedowns or maybe 6 takedowns in his entire UFC career, and that's quite a few
exactly?
fights as well.
And it's you can't, coming into the second round of a big fight like this, you can't suddenly turn into a wrestler because you can't figure Gane out. He going into the fight, you knew Gane was going to be in and out, working the jab, teep kicking, low kicking, attack the leg, take that movement away. And what's the worst that can happen? You can get caught a little bit in the pocket when you're trying to land the low kick, but at least you're gonna land the low kick instead of just looking for a right hand or just looking for a big counter. I I don't think he had a game plan going in there, and if he did, it was terrible in executing it. And I'm just disappointed in Derek Lewis, to be honest.
Yeah, and I can absolutely agree with you in terms of they obviously didn't have any game plan that was effective. And what, like you said, what was their plan B? It sounds like you guys came up out of nowhere to go for a takedown, but like, did you guys train for that? Did you guys plan for that? Because you're essentially asking your fighter to fight in a way in which he's never fought before. Even throwing in some leg kicks now and again. Derek Lewis also isn't even a huge leg kicker, but that would have been something that you guys should have been training for to set up. He's a big moving fighter. Maybe kick out the legs from under him. If you're just planning for the big right hand, you guys have been fighting this way for 20 UFC fights. We've seen it all on the broadcast before. I mean, this is a title fight, and even we got the lines coming into this fight of Derek Lewis is training harder than he ever has before. He's going for like bike rides they were talking about and stuff like that. We didn't see that. We like he still fought the same as he always does. What was your guys' game plan? Just land the right hand, or what was the setup for it? Yada yada yada. But yeah,
Exactly.
like you said, there just wasn't anything. Um, he was a punching bag, right?
Exactly. And like you say, what was the setup for it? Throw a jab. The first round, he landed 3 strikes.
Yeah,
The second
yeah,
round, he landed 5 strikes. In the third round, he landed 8 strikes. But I think, he only landed more strikes in the third round because when Gane was unloading on him when he had him hurt, Derek Lewis was maybe firing back with 1 or 2 just to stay in there. You're
mm-hmm.
in your hometown. You're having your second. Yeah, okay, yes, it's an interim belt, but you're having your second
Yeah.
shot at gold. After your first shot, no one expected you to get it done against Cormier in New York. You were sort of not even a late replacement. You're just a late fighter to that. The style matchup was
Yeah,
bad.
yeah, it was.
This, Derek Lewis, this might be his last opportunity because you've got the Stipe's, the John Joneses, the, Curtis Blades is going to be coming back. And, that's still a bad style matchup for Derek Lewis on paper. Obviously he did finish him, but, you've got the Volkovs that was beating him for the best part of, 3 rounds and 4.5 minutes. There's a lot of bad style matchups that could go the other way. So this is probably Derek Lewis's last opportunity at UFC Gold because he's not getting any younger as well. Derek Lewis, he's I don't know. I think he's 35, maybe slightly older, 36 maybe. He's not
Yeah.
getting any younger. And I know heavyweights do tend to go a little bit later on in their career, but with a style like his where it relies on fairly quick reactions to be able to land the right hand, you can't fight the top level fighters like this. He got away with it against Francis Ngannou because Ngannou was gun shy in that one.
Mm-hmm.
He's not. It was all, in my opinion, it was Gane beats him 10 times out of 10.
Yeah.
Just style matchup, and we can go into details of the fact that Gane was 20 pounds lighter than Lewis, but in the clinch looked considerably stronger than him.
Yeah,
And
absolutely. Yeah, he really did, didn't he?
It was, I expected maybe Lewis that might have been his plan B, maybe try and wear on Gane. We haven't seen Gane tired. The more tired Gane gets, he won't be on his feet in and out so much. Then the right hand will be there a bit, it'll be available a bit more if he's more static in front of you. But he dominated in the clinch, really, Gane did. And, little things that Gane did, like when Lewis did throw a big overhand, Gane's got the skill to go from orthodox, avoid the strike, and then stand in southpaw and not have to be forced to take multiple steps back. He can just take one step back, and he's comfortable in southpaw. and then he can reset and go into orthodox, or he can reset and go into southpaw, depending on which way you have to turn. And we've seen the classic teep kick of Conor McGregor just going straight through his opponent. Ngannou kind of almost with the outside of the foot, so he doesn't even have to be square on to his opponent where he could be in danger. He can still be out on the outside of the lead foot and sort of whip the teep kick in on almost on like an angle. It's not going to be as powerful, no, but it allows him to stay on the outside of that lead foot and still get the teep kick off and keep his opponent at bay. We constantly saw him power jabs, little leg kick, stomps to the knee, just keeping Lewis guessing the entire time. And obviously it paid off. And Derek Lewis, I think, will be sitting there today and thinking, it wasn't a close fight. I was well beaten. And hypothetically, should I ever get a rematch, there's going to be a lot that I need. There's going to be a lot that I need to change my entire game. I need to turn into a relentless wrestler, or I need to turn into a leg kicking phenom to even get close to Gane, who's only going to be getting better.
Yeah, I don't know what's next for Derek. I really do appreciate the technical breakdown. That was really good as well with the stance switching and the teep kicks. He has in all honesty, Ciryl Gane is an extremely good fighter. He's a very good fighter. Like we were talking about, he's taken the best notes from some of the early French kickboxing of the late 90s and stuff like that. And he really does show it. And especially in a heavyweight division, which is quite slow, he's a very fast fighter. He's a phenom. Now, the next fight, we're being set up for a teammate versus teammate fight, two French-speaking fighters. Both guys are true full-size heavyweights. We haven't seen this since like Shane Carwin and Brock Lesnar. This is truly a great fight, and it's two strikers. I don't know. I'm excited for it. And that's the UFC got what they wanted out of it, in that there's now a storyline coming into the Francis Ngannou fight. And I know I'm excited for it. What do you see in that matchup? I know we're going to break it down going forward, but just kind of coming off a big Ciryl Gane win, what do you see in the Francis Ngannou fight?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I'm as excited as you are, I think. And then we're as excited as everyone, and no one's going to be as excited as Dana White in the UFC, because this is exactly the fight. No one wants to see a repeat of Derek Lewis, Francis Ngannou 1, as it were. That's the likelihood of that happening again is almost nil. But even so, you can't say, it's an epic rematch after their epic first battle. It's one of the worst fights in UFC history. They just stood and watched each other for 15 minutes and landed, the odd strike. It was
great.
It was, yeah. It is what I can't even talk about it, to be honest. It bores me to sleep just thinking about it. But this is a fresh matchup, like you say, teammate versus teammate, two French speakers, still both fairly inexperienced, really. They haven't got an awful lot of fights between them. Stand up, but they can. Obviously, we saw Francis wrestle against Stipe. We've seen Gane be able to pull off the submissions. I think Gane, having just defeated Lewis, who is a big puncher, Lewis, as we said it last week, it's the perfect opponent for Gane to have faced just before facing Ngannou. So, let's say Gane faced Curtis Blades in the interim title fight. He's going to be working the wrestling, working the takedown defense, not worrying so much about the striking, but being aware of the striking. When he's been preparing for Lewis, he's been preparing for avoiding that right hand, avoiding the blitzes of Lewis. How do you beat Francis Ngannou? Avoid the right hand, avoid the blitzes.
Yeah, I know.
I'm not trying to say that Derek Lewis is as good as Francis Ngannou, but their game is very similar. It's land the big bomb. Francis is not a technical guy by any stretch. We've seen the Rosenstruck knockout where they're just both windmilling and Francis happens to land first. The knockout of Overeem, although it's good, technically, if you watch the knockout, it's not a great technical. He leaves himself very open for a counter, Francis. Whereas on the other side, you've got Gane, who hasn't got that raw one-punch knockout power, but everything he does is how you would teach it. Everything. He's constantly keeping his defense up when he's on the attack. He's switching stance. He's as good out of southpaw as he is out of orthodox. I think it's a really interesting fight, and maybe there's a slightly recency bias, but I'd probably go with Gane in the fight, to be honest.
Yeah, I can definitely see that. Being a longer striker, being a much more technical striker, probably favors you against a guy who's a little bit more of the brawling. Francis Ngannou really does thrive in exchanges. That's where he absolutely does his best. And we saw so far in the UFC that Cyril Gane plays his game, which is not getting into exchanges. And in none of his UFC fight has he gone into exchanges with his opponent. He trades shots with them. I am looking forward to Francis Ngannou being in a new camp, but he's only had one fight out of there and looked really good. So I'm curious what game plan they come up with going into this fight. But yeah, that's a great fight. We're going to be breaking it down quite a bit going in. So it's going to be a really good one. Anything else we want to cover before the main event, before we can get to our best friend, Jose Aldo?
No, I'm hoping that fight maybe gets to, they maybe bring it to Europe, bring it to France. Obviously, we've seen Bellator obviously tap into that French market just the once with, I think it's Czech Congo and Timothy Johnson, and I know MVP and Ross Houston were on the card, I believe. So, whether the UFC will want to put such a big fight in France, in Europe, doubtful, to be honest, but it would be the perfect fight to really break into that market. And there's, I'm working on an article at the moment creating the first French UFC card. What kind of names we could expect on there. You've obviously got plenty of British fighters that, it's a half an hour flight for British fans. So
there's
you're
a train.
Laughing really as far. Exactly, yeah. Train, ferry, and literally British fans will flood. It's a home. It's personally for myself, it's as long to get from where I live down to London for the O2 Arena show as it is for me to get over to France. So it's for a lot of fans as well. The fans really like yourself. You live in Scotland, I believe.
Yeah, that's right.
So it's going to be just as quick for you to go over to France as it is you to come all the way down to London. So there'll be plenty of British interest in that. When Darren Till went over to Gdansk to fight Cowboy, and we've had shows in Hamburg, shows in Copenhagen and whatnot. So France is really that untapped market at the moment.
Yeah, I hope so. It'd be a cool fight, especially trying to trailblaze into a new market. That'd be a really heavyweight title fight, both French speaking. That's kind of a great story. The UFC tends not to do cool things like that. They tend to favor we make more money at the T-Mobile Arena. We're just going to go back to the T-Mobile Arena again. That's kind of the long and short of it. But I do hope they do something cool here because it's a great time.
Exactly. And the last title fight we had was Bisping Henderson. And that was put on, even though it was in Manchester, it was put on at 4:00 in the morning. So UK fans still had to stay up or get up for the fight. So they did it in the UK, 4:00 in the morning. So you're leaving the fight night. You're leaving the pay-per-view at 6 a.m. and having to go home and go to sleep then, which is, they're catering for the US fans, but spare a thought for us UK fans.
I think the last really cool thing that they did like that was when they did Whitaker versus Adesanya at the Marvel Stadium in Australia. But that one, it was opposite to a major Australian football event. So they did something really cool, and then it kind of probably didn't pay off as well. However, when they went to the Marvel Stadium, do you know if it was at local Australian time or was it tailored to the US fans?
I think it was, yeah, because I seem to remember it being in the morning here.
Oh, that's perfect.
It would be in the evening, Australia, or sort of 10 a.m. here. So it would be in the evening Australian time. And they're doing a similar thing when they go to Fight Island, Their fight,
the Habib
when
fight
the guys on Fight Island, the Habib fights, they're fighting about 9:00 in the morning, I believe, often. And maybe not every time, but they are fighting early in the morning over there. So it's catering for the UK fans, but also the US fans are getting a taste of what us UK fans have to deal with, getting up at 3 a.m. for the main card or staying awake for the entire card. And it's tough, but that's why, bringing it into the French market, Bellator do it right. They've tapped into Italy, France, Newcastle, Birmingham, they've really tapped into the European market. So I think the UFC are playing catch up with Bellator with regards to that.
So hopefully they do something really cool and do a major show in Paris, do it at local time. That would just be amazing. For you and I, we could probably cover that one live. That would be a really cool one. I'd be super into that.
Exactly.
For selfish reasons. I had a guy on Twitter. Never mind that. Anyway, so Jose Aldo versus Pedro Munhoz. I'm going to echo what you said about Derek Lewis with Pedro. Jose Aldo is one of the guys that we've loved. He really was a major champion coming out in 2009, 2010, 2011. He's one of the greatest fighters of all time. He hasn't changed his game in 12 to 13 years now. You know what he's going to bring. If anything, he's a slower fighter than he was back in 2009. And he's also shrunk his game quite a bit because, kicking can break his legs and stuff like that. So he shrunk his game quite a bit. We know what his game plan is going to be, and he kind of does the same thing every fight. He's done the same thing every fight and still a top 5 fighter. He's an amazing fighter, but Pedro really didn't show any looks that look to exploit some of the weaknesses that we've seen in Jose Aldo. For whatever reason, he kept using straight line entries. He wasn't doing a huge amount of he tried a few leg kicks that got checked, but clearly there wasn't much of a plan B. But I'm curious, what was your plan A? Because your plan A was abysmal. Like, all the stuff that works against Jose Aldo, you tried none of it. You kind of played into what Aldo tries to do. But if you're going to try straight line entry at this level against Jose Aldo, I don't know what your future holds. You're obviously not going to catch him in any exchanges. You're not going to bait him into this. What do you think of the fight? What do you think of Aldo? What do you think of the game plan for Pedro?
Yeah, I'm echoing what you're saying. I think it was Cruz on the commentary was saying, why is he trying all these spinning attacks? Try one, try two, maybe. But when they don't work, they're energy sappers. And, what it's not like he was catching him on the end of the spinning attacks even. He was miles away with those spinning attacks. Aldo was seeing his hips load. And by the time that Munhoz did the first little sort of even first motion of the spinning attack, Aldo took just even a half step back, and Munhoz absolutely miles away.
That was it.
And like you say, to me, this is vintage Jose. This is WEC. This is pre-Reebok Jose Aldo. Being able to stay in the pocket just long enough to land his strikes, but then just out of range to not get caught with the counter strikes. And if he does get caught, his guards up high, it's strong boxing. The leg kick was back to almost what we expect of Jose Aldo. His range management, it was phenomenal. And this is why I was thinking about it as I was watching the fight. Cody Garbrandt is a lucky man that fight I know it was never official, but it was rumored. Cody Garbrandt does not want to be staying in the pocket with someone like Aldo, because Aldo is one of the best inside fighters, like Cody's kryptonite. He's one of the best inside fighters that I've seen in a long time. He's getting better almost, Jose. Being able to rip to the body as often as going upstairs. So he's constantly on Saturday night, he's constantly keeping Munhoz guessing whether you can only make yourself so small and cover your head. And it would be one exchange, you'd go to the head, second exchange, you go to the head, then he'd rip to the body, then he'd back to the head, then he's body, head. So it's constantly keeping Munhoz guessing. And then, occasionally he'd finish off the exchange with a leg kick, but then he wouldn't do it every time because he was, he knew that Munhoz make the read on him that if he does it every time, he'll get checked. So it was a well-deserved dominant victory for Aldo. And
honestly, he had some great
straight back in the title contention, in my opinion.
Yeah, he had some great combination punching. I do love that he mixes high and low. This is why he was such a phenom even before he entered the UFC. He was someone that everyone clearly picked out that this guy's the next champion, just because he seemed like he was head and shoulders above these guys. And you kind of see that in some of these fights. If a guy's not in the top 5, he's just going to dance around them. He's so far ahead of some of these guys. Next fight for him, I think he can still do well in this bantamweight weight class. He did well against Petr Yan for the half of the fight before he got pummeled, but he did well up to that point. I've seen people throw out TJ Dillashaw quite a bit. Personally, I would love to see him big against Dominic Cruz. I think he would beat Dominic Cruz as well, personally. Dillashaw is a much taller order and a much harder fight, but maybe there's a storyline there with, I uncrowned your teammate Renan Barão 5 years ago. Maybe you want revenge. I don't know. What do you see next for Jose Aldo career?
Yeah, I think I know that he called for the TJ Dillashaw fight, which, who wouldn't want to watch that? But I think for Dillashaw next should be, sort of forgetting Jose Aldo for if I'm Dillashaw, I either wait out for the title picture, or if I'm forced into it, a rematch with Sandhagen, because that fight was too close to, we broke it down a few weeks ago. It was a very close fight. I think the Dominic Cruz fight would be good, but for Aldo, it doesn't really do much for him. I think Cruz is ranked maybe
He's
ninth.
behind, yeah,
Yeah,
10th in the division.
yeah. So 10th in the division, whereas he's just beat number 9. So although on paper it'd be a great fight, does that do anything for Aldo, who's still wanting to make those moves towards the title? I'm not so sure. Maybe he waits out to see what the title picture holds and faces the loser of that. If Jan wins the title, he maybe faces an Aljo. But I think I know he's only 34, but he's not getting any younger. He needs to stay active. So
in terms of
it,
fight years, he's pretty old.
exactly, yeah. And everyone, there's a big going into the week that him and Munhoz, I think, are the same age, and
Yeah.
he's only 34 and all this. But like you say, he's only 34. But when he's lost, he's lost pretty badly against, obviously, McGregor being flatlined twice against Holloway, Jan, the Volkanovski took a lot of damage in, and now he's obviously making the cut down to 135. Although he's making the weight, not with ease, but although he's making the weight and never missed a weight, it takes a toll on your body. So I think he needs to keep his foot on the pedal. Maybe a Rob Font next, or I think if he does have to maybe drop down in the ranks, a Frankie Edgar, but Edgar's coming off a loss. I think he needs to fight someone above him in the rankings, and he might switch places with Rob Font in today's ranking change. But I think that's the logical next one. Neither of them booked. They both fought. Font was only a month or two ago against Garbrandt, and Aldo is obviously just on Saturday night. So take a few months out, and then figure out. We'll probably see him by the end of the year, but he's got options because he looks so good against Munhoz, which is good.
Where the division is in a few months, yeah, take a closer look at it then and maybe figure it out. I've seen people even throw out Sandhagen. Edgar's an interesting one because they did fight at UFC 200, and it was a close fight back then as well, if I remember correctly. But
yeah, 5 rounds as well, wasn't it? So
yeah, I think it was a good fight. Yeah, he has taken a lot of damage against Holloway in those couple of fights there, and what a career this guy has had. Jose Aldo is a legend, one of the greats in the sport, and he's still competing. He's still good. We're talking about he's could make a run for the title still. Incredible stuff. So whatever fight is next for him, I'm excited for it, and I'd love to see it
for sure.
Michael Chiesa versus Vicente Luque kind of didn't go how I expected at all. I think you picked Luque in this fight, right?
I did, yeah. I
thought good job, well picked,
yeah.
Good picks.
I definitely didn't pick him by submission. I'll say that.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, the thing is, I didn't have as much faith in Luque's submission game as Luque did. I think obviously last time out we saw him against Woodley and he snatched a submission. This time I rewatched the fight. It's only a minute and a half long, so I've watched it about 3 or 4 times, especially the finishing sequence. He did well to defend against, he had his back taken. I thought it was in, and he managed to just get his hip out and reverse the position. Now, he obviously had a lot of faith in his own ground game. We saw him on the embedded episodes training and rolling with Gilbert Burns. So that's, it's going to give you confidence. If you can hang with Gilbert Burns, or you've got Gilbert Burns in your corner, you're going to be full of confidence.
Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu world champion Gilbert Burns, mind
you. Exactly. Exactly. If you're rolling with him day in, day out in fight week as well, with the greatest respect to Chiesa, you're not going to be too worried about what Chiesa's got on the ground if you can, especially if you've been competitive with Burns. And the finishing sequence, it was from a different camera angle. You can see that I think Chiesa thinks that Luque is going to try and stand back up and clear the distance, as it were, between them and turn it back into a stand-up fight. Because Chiesa does nothing to sort of protect his head or protect his neck. And Luque almost locks in I think they were talking on a breakdown show that I was watching, that it wasn't actually a dart, it was a Barabo or Brabo choke, because it's from the other side or something like that. But we'll call it a dart for argument's sake. But he locked that in, knowing that he was in a rough position on the floor prior to that, and he was willing to go straight back to the floor because he had so much faith in that choke.
Yep.
It would have been so much easier and more straightforward for him to push Chiesa down, push Chiesa's head down, push him away, clear distance, and then go back to his stand-up game. But he had so much faith in his own choke, which is, I really like to see it. He's Luque. We've seen him in these wars with Barberena and Mike Perry in the last two fights. He's seen an opportunity for a submission. He's a well-rounded mixed martial artist. He's not just a banger. He's not just a brawler. He's seen the opportunity twice in a row, and he snatched it with both hands. And he's a real contender at 170 now.
I think I completely agree with you in that he's a real contender. He's probably, he's moving into the top 5. He's probably the next contender for a title after the November event. And I think he's a little bit better of a fighter than I expected him to be, in that he's not a sprawl and brawl fighter. He was willing to go and exchange submissions against someone like Michael Chiesa. Michael Chiesa slapped on 2 submissions. Luque survived both of them. And then on the next attempt, he went for his own submission, like you said, rather than trying to stand up. And it worked out extremely well. So now that's 2 submissions in a row against very high-level opponents. Though in both fights and throughout his career, we've seen he is very hittable. Even Michael Chiesa managed to hit him. Even an old Tyron Woodley managed to crack him once, So I am curious. I don't know. I think Kamaru Usman is a tough fight for him. But if, let's say, Kamaru gets past Colby Covington in November and they set up a Vicente Luque versus Kamaru Usman next, how do you see that fight playing out?
I think I'm echoing what you're saying. It's a tough fight for him. The jab of Usman is it's a laser, and if he gets sort of cut open by the great respect by Chiesa, who is a fairly rudimentary striker, he uses striking to get the clinch and get it down to the ground. He's gonna struggle with Usman, I think.
Absolutely.
And with Usman, you have to go in with your plan A of standing with him, and your plan B is landing a Hail Mary takedown. He's never been taken down in the UFC, so
100%
your plan B
defense.
it's got to be something other than going to the wrestling game, because you can go to your plan A if you're not working. Your plan B is the wrestling game. Your plan B is not going to work, so you've already got to sort of skip that step and go to plan C, which is, it'll be whatever it is. Maybe try and work the clinch, but he's so big and he's so strong, Usman. I think he'd probably dominate Luque, unfortunately. But for Luque, he's in a difficult position, because if ahead of him in the rankings, obviously we've got Leon Edwards and Stephen Thompson and Gilbert Burns. Now, he's never going to fight Burns because they're teammates, unless one of them does an Usman and move to a different team. Sure. He's already lost to Leon Edwards pretty handily in London a few years ago, and he was dominated by Stephen Thompson.
Yeah, it's a tough position to make the case.
When there's 2 people above you that have already beaten you pretty handily, and Covington, who's a bad stylistic matchup for him, as well as your teammate Burns, it's tough to make the case that he deserves the next title shot, But 10 wins out of his last 11, or 9 out of his last 10, I think, all finishes. He's, I don't think he's only been to decision once or twice in his career. Sorry, he's only won by decision twice in his career, against Mike Perry that time, and I think early on in his career. But his last since he fought Thompson, well, prior to that he had the submission over Nico Price, KO, TKO, then the split decision, the fight of the night against Mike Perry, lost the decision to Stephen Thompson, doctor stoppage win against Nico Price, KO against Randy Brown, and then obviously a submission against Tyron Woodley and submission against Chiesa, which, these are all fight of the night or performance of the night. He's money. If you get in a Vicente Luque fight, you're going to be entertained.
It's going to be a banger. Yeah, that's absolutely true. It's going to be some entertaining stuff. I do agree with you for the top level of the division. Probably not much going on there. Moving down the card, we have Tecia Torres handily defeats Angela Hill. A fight, I always pick Angie Hill. I was a bit surprised to see Tecia Torres do that well, but she was the favorite going in, so maybe there was something there I wasn't quite seeing. Song Yadong versus Casey Kenney. Song Yadong gets a close, tight split decision win in a really competitive bantamweight division. I don't know who you set him up with next. Bantamweight's such a tough division, right? Like Song Yadong trying to break into that division. He's not Like he's not ranked in the top 15 still. What do you do with a
No,
guy
no,
who's he's won a few fights now?
exactly. Yeah, he it's difficult because obviously he's coming off the loss last time out against Kyler Phillips, which, and then Kyler Phillips lost his last fight. So, but prior to that, he was undefeated in the UFC. He beat, drawn with Cody Stamann. He beat Marlon Vera, and now he beats Casey Kenney. He probably gets himself ranked in the top 15, but
That's probably later today by the time this is up. Yeah.
yeah. So, but top 15, you've got Cody Stamann at 15, Marlon Vera is already beat at 14. Maybe you're setting up with a Jimmy Rivera or Rafael Sunsao, but like we were just discussing, he doesn't get anywhere near the top of the division because there's
It's so
six or
good.
seven. Yeah, exactly. There's 6 or 7 guys above him, and for Casey Kenney, it's a shame. He went on a bit of a run, didn't he? When he beat Lewis Smoker, and then I think he had another fight, and then quite soon after that fight, I think he fought Nathaniel Wood, and unfortunately for UK fans, handled Wood fairly easily, and then he fought Dominic Cruz, lost a split decision, lost another split decision this weekend against Song Yadong. So I think Kenny maybe needs to go back to the drawing board a little bit and, maybe try and, like we say, you can't just turn into a wrestler, but he's got a solid judo background and try and turn, make your fights a little bit boring maybe. And if it's a close fight, get the fight to the floor in the third round or the end of, mid second round, third round, and just look to get the win because he's now on a 2-fight skid. It's not a great, he's a fun fighter, but there's no great pull to see him in there again. So, it's disappointing for Kenny, but it's a good performance by Yadong. And I think Yadong's only, he's early 20s. So I think, yeah, he's 23. So training with Uriah Faber. So I think the sky's the limit for Yadong for sure.
Yeah, no, he's been one to watch for quite a while now, and I hope he continues to develop and continue to get better. Also within the bantamweight division, or sorry, moving down to flyweight, but maybe a future bantamweight from the looks of things. Manel Kape finally gets a win in the UFC, a much deserved win, a really good timing knockout knee against Ode Osborne. Everyone said like Manel Kape is the guy to watch. You and I have said it since he entered the UFC, and he's kind of struggled or just looked disappointing. He missed weight coming into this one and then gets a really quick first round knockout. That's super cool. What do you think of the future for Manel Kape? Does he have to get forced going up into bantamweight? And what do you do with him even there?
The thing is with Kape, I've been thinking about it yesterday after I saw his knockout, which was brilliant. But I disliked everything about him apart from the time that he was in the octagon. Pre-fight, missed weight, and it wasn't just like a 127. He's 129, so he's missed weight, missed it. He's missed flyweight by 4 pounds, and he's missed. He obviously, because it's a non-title fight, they get the extra pound. He's missed it by 3 pounds, so he's missed weight. He then gets all up in the face of Ode Osborne at the ceremonial weigh-ins. Mate, you miss weight. Have a bit of respect for your opponent. Yes, some of your purse is goes into the octagon. Really good performance, and I did, when Aldana missed weight a few weeks ago, she came straight on the microphone. Okay, I'm sorry for missing weight. Yana, thanks for taking the fight. I apologize for missing weight. Sure. It won't happen again. Blah blah blah. Manel Kape's there. He's calling for a bonus. You can't get a bonus if you've missed weight. He's saying, "Give me a top 5, top 10 guy." He's 1 and 2 in the UFC. He's not getting a top 5 guy, and he's saying, "I'm the best 125." Prove it. Win more than just one fight against an unranked guy by what some are calling an early stoppage. I think the stoppage was fine. A flying knee and strikes. It was. I think the referee. I think the stoppage was fine. I've seen some people say it was early, but
it's fine.
If you leave that one too many, Ode goes possibly out cold, and what's the point in Ode Osborne going out cold when he could have saved himself, or the referee saved him from 2 extra strikes? I think it's fine. But, Kape needs to, like you say, I don't think he fits into the bantamweight division. There's too many bantamweights. These guys either need to put on a bit of weight and go up to featherweight or cut down to flyweight. There's too many to be. There's there's not enough. We need a bantamweight one night bantamweight tournament. I think of the top 20 guys and just almost clear out the division because it's good that it's so stacked and there's so many big players, but at the same time, it's tiring to try and match everyone up in bantamweight, which I'm not complaining about. It's good, but at the same time, you've got Cape that's possibly coming into the division. You've got Song Yadong, who obviously isn't even ranked in the top 15, but is I think 6-5-1 or 6-1 in the UFC now. It's Aldo is looking like the new Aldo of old, as it were. You got Munhoz, who yes, he didn't have a great game plan going in, but at the same time, it was he going up against Jose Aldo. You've got Miles Johns on the undercard as well. Who got that savage knockout. He's at bantamweight, so there's so many bantamweight contenders from top all the way down to you're talking 20-30 bantamweight contenders.
Yeah, I know. Yeah, it's insane how good bantamweight is. I don't think for Manel Kape he should move up to bantamweight because flyweight is a much. If you are trying to get a title in the UFC and you can make flyweight. But yeah, his conduct has been questionable. I want him to do very well in the UFC, but he hasn't given us fans much reason to really hope for his future, where sometimes he just gets on cruise control, sometimes he showboats in fights where he's losing the fights. If you remember his conduct with Ian McCall in Ryzen a few years ago, sometimes he just kind of throws stuff away, but he also didn't have good training for years. He only just started training Muay Thai at a proper gym. He was training at home in Angola before this. So I don't know. So every time he's like 2 steps ahead, 2 steps back kind of fighter. So I don't know what the future holds for Manel Kape. But one of your boys, Rafael Fiziev, has a really close fight and a really great banger with Bobby Green here. He passed the gatekeeper test. He certainly beat Bobby Green in this fight. Were you impressed with him? And what do you think the future holds for Rafael Fiziev? It was a fun fight.
It was, again, maybe recency bias. For me, it's one of the fights of the year. I thought it's for me, a fight of the year should have you constantly on your toes. Either man could have got clipped and finished. There's a little bit of friendly trash talk, competitive trash talk, I should say, in there. One lands a shot, shakes his head, the other lands a shot, shakes his head. They're talking to each other.
Yeah.
The 30-27 scorecard was ridiculous.
That third round was so clearly that was almost a 10-8 for Bobby Green.
Yeah, exactly. I would, 100%. Just quickly looking at the stats here, Bobby Green landed 48 against Fiziev's 18. And the other 2 rounds, sorry, I was struck to the head. He landed 66 against Fiziev's 43. The other 2 rounds, 32-25. Bobby Green actually outlanded him in the first. He landed him actually across the whole fight, but I think Fiziev landed the more meaningful strikes. But we definitely saw Fiziev slow down in the third, to the end of the second in the third. I think it was a valuable 15 minutes for him. He came out maybe because he got the knockout on Moicano last time out, and he came out looking to finish Bobby Green with every strike that he threw. That's okay in the first round, but then manage your energy, I think. But like I say, I think it's a good learning 15 minutes, knowing that, okay, if I don't get the knockout, or if this guy doesn't look like he's going anywhere, rein it in a bit, manage your energy, be a little bit more sensible. And I think, we haven't seen his ground game an awful lot, but I think he's really one to watch at 155. But again, the 155 division is so stacked that it's going to be hard for him to continue to break into, not even the title pitch, just to continue to break into relevance in the 155 division with all the big names that are there. But if he keeps on putting performances like this and entertaining fights, it's gonna come. So
Yeah, it's hard at 155, but Bobby Green is one of the few gentlemen at 155 who shows really good defensive striking, whereas most of 155 is amazing offensive striking, and most of those guys don't have a lot of defensive striking. Like even Charles Oliveira, he's just an output offense fighter with almost no defense. Dustin Poirier has some defense. Justin Gaethje, Beneil Dariush, like Javier Dos Anjos, Kevin Lee, just like output. Dan Hooker, output. So Bobby Green is one of the only guys who's really going to show a lot of. And what we saw in this fight, he was dodging extremely well. He was pivoting. He was rotating out. He was doing a lot of really good defensive things. So Fiziev still has a chance to break into that top 10. I don't know what's next for him. I always want to say Kevin Lee, I guess. If you need a win, fight Kevin Lee. I
Yeah,
don't
because
know.
he's just had his fight cancelled, hasn't he? Again, he was obviously
Again.
scheduled to fight Sean Brady at 170. That got cancelled beforehand. It's been cancelled again. I think Brady pulled out this time, so that would you'd assume that Lee's fit, whether we can make 155. Obviously not for maybe for the same event, but it would take a few months for him to diet back down to try and make 155.
Mm.
You know, he's a betweener between 170 and 155, Kevin Lee. And do you want to see him deplete himself to go up against Fiziev? But then, you know, the wrestling game of Kevin Lee is what we want to see Fiziev. That's it. One questions I have about Cyril Gane is he's never faced a wrestler. It was the question against Conor McGregor before he fought Chad Mendes. Never really
Mm-hmm.
faced a wrestler. Kevin Lee would answer that question straight away. You know, he's a good striker, as we saw against Gregor Gillespie, but he can also wrestle as well. So why not put Fiziev up against Kevin Lee and really test him? But if not, you've got, you know, maybe a Brad Riddell, I think would be a fun fight, or a Drew Dober.
Mm-hmm.
I think both of them, you know, they're both there to be hit, but can both wrestle if needs be. I think those fights make sense, and they were both ranked. They've just had to fight themselves, fighting each other, I should say. And
Mm-hmm.
you know, they're both ranked in and around the top 15. So you know, and I think they're a good litmus test as to how you deal with the upper echelons of the division.
Yeah, I can absolutely see that. It's tough. It's tough when you're an up and comer at lightweight because everyone in front of you is just so dang good. But yeah, Kevin Lee, he's the best fighter in the world for the first 3 minutes of every fight. He's even gotten mount and was reigning ground and pound against every fighter he's lost to. Like even Charles Oliveira, he was winning that fight before he was losing. So Kevin Lee is a dangerous opponent and also a really it's so weird. He's an ideal opponent and he's also a really dangerous opponent. But his whole career is just what do you say about Kevin Lee? He might be the best
Yeah,
fighter in the world for three
yeah,
minutes every fight, and then he just kind of fades away or like drifts off
it's
or something.
it's difficult, isn't it? He's still one I'd say, like Conor McGregor, never quite or hasn't quite yet realized his potential because
Yeah,
he's an athlete as well. He is a very good athlete, but he's almost too muscular for his own good. He gets tired. He seems to be absolutely fine, like you say, for the first 3 or 4 minutes.
amazing.
But then there's an absolute. It's not like a gradual, like we saw for Zev. He gets tired, but he gradually gets tired, as you would, as you know, 75-80% of the roster does in the UFC. They're not as fast in the third round as they are in the first. But
Yeah,
for Lee, he goes from full gas tank for the first 3 minutes, wrestling, striking, you know, good defense, to 10% throwing the odd jab out there to try and keep his opponent off.
yeah,
And every time we've seen him on the stool, he looks like he needs that 1 minute rest every single time. You know, when he's facing the likes of, you know, Gregor Gillespie, I think he was lucky to have got the knockout because Gillespie can put a pace on you that is unrivaled by a lot of people, especially at lightweight.
looking
If that would have
absolutely.
gone
Yeah,
into the later rounds, I think Gillespie maybe even gets a TKO finish just due how tired Lee would likely be. But yeah, I think that. I mean, I think that it'd be a good fight, like you say. It will test the wrestling, but whether he's going to be a 155, we haven't seen him. I can't even remember the last time we saw. Oh, it was just before the pandemic against Oliveira, wasn't it? So the
that's true. That was a
first
while
show
ago.
without fans. So that was last March.
Oh,
He
and he
hasn't
did
looked
well.
like.
Like Kevin
Yeah,
Lee, he did well against Dos Anjos before he lost. He should have beat Ali Quinta. Like you're a better fighter than that. He beat Barboza, lost to Ferguson, but even he had moments against Tony
yeah.
Ferguson
He
in
was
which he was right.
end of the first round, I think it was. He was landing a lot of ground and pound on Tony, and you know, he's unlucky really that Tony's so durable and can take the Tony of old can take the shots, So
it's just insane. Like, I don't know how good Kevin Lee is, and I just can't get a read on this guy. He's so good in spots. But anyway, you got a fantasy matchup for me? What do you got going on this week?
I have indeed. So I love a leg kick. I've written an article about a leg kick, and I just, yeah, it's and it's not just a low calf kick. It's all over leg. It's to attack. If you can't walk, you can't fight. Really,
That's
if you can't plod forward, you can't put any weight. Like we were talking earlier, if Derek Lewis would have attacked the legs of Gane, slows him right down. Gane did the right thing by attacking the lead leg of Lewis, and you can't put the weight on that leg then to land the power shot. So my fantasy matchup this week: Douglas Lima and
nice.
Justin Gaethje.
Oh, that's a good one. I do like that one.
It'll end up being, I think, a pretty decent jiu-jitsu match because both men's legs will just be absolutely battered by the end of the first round. So they might even just one goes out and pulls guard straight away. But I think, yeah, they'll just go out there and just sit in the pocket and attack each other's legs. And yeah, I would watch that all day long.
Both cover up, both shell up. I mean, Lima's against the fence, obviously, but both are shelling up and just hucking leg kicks at each other. Yeah, it's a great fight. That's a lot of fun. I mean, so in that one, it's interesting because I would probably pick Justin Gaethje despite the size advantage because Lima would be a slightly bigger fighter in that fight. How do you see that fight playing out? Who would you pick?
Lima struggles to get down to 170, so I think he would have a big size advantage. But if we're going to assume it plays out on the feet, I don't think that will make too much of a difference. Gaethje's not the smallest 155er, but he's also not the biggest. So True. He probably walks around at 170, 165 maybe.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think the difference would be Gaethje's inside leg kick power. He's landed leg kicks in the clinch that I don't think personally, I've never seen before. Leg kicks that tend to be that slightly more at range strike that you land a jab and you land a leg kick, or you just land the leg kick to almost keep your opponent guessing and just to keep the output there. Gaethje will be in a phone booth with his opponent and throwing leg kicks there because it's something you don't expect. You're going to be covering up your body. You're going to be anticipating maybe, a little uppercut or an elbow or a knee or something, and then you get your leg kicked out, and then you're having to defend the elbow. I probably, like yourself, I think I'd favor Gaethje in that one.
Yeah, and tough, good fighters have talked about Justin Gaethje and his leg kick, and they just go like, man, I would rather not fight this guy. Like even a fight Dustin Poirier won, says like, I don't want to fight Justin Gaethje. Those leg kicks really hurt. Sure. He throws them at 100% from any range, and it really does hurt you. He said, I never felt more pain than the week after fighting Justin Gaethje.
Yeah, exactly. So it's one of those where I think on paper it's like, Gaethje's just a brawler. He's got fairly good boxing, but then you get in there, he wobbled Khabib with a leg kick in their fight, and he barely got any offense off in that fight.
Khabib even said if he landed a couple more leg kicks, I probably would have had to change what I was doing because those hurt.
Exactly. So, and he was leg kicking before it was fashionable almost. Everyone's leg kicking these days. Menafield, we saw at the weekend leg kicking. We saw obviously Aldo go back to the leg kicks. Till Gane landed some good leg kicks in that third round, and Gaethje was doing it back in World Series of Fighting days, which is something that we weren't seeing, and people weren't really prepared to check the leg. Obviously they maybe trained it a couple of times, but there's training it, and then there's receiving one off Justin Gaethje. It's a whole different ball game, I think.
Yeah, that's an absolutely great matchup. I love that. Lima versus Gaethje. That's a banger right there. Mine's a little bit more pedestrian. Everyone talks about it. George St-Pierre versus Kamaru Usman this week on the website, and it's still up there. And I'll link it down below. Is doing a statistical comparison. Not even like I'm biased towards one of these guys, just a statistical comparison. George just made a career of beating D1 wrestlers. His record against D1 wrestlers is 7 wins. Like it's a weird thing that just for whatever reason during that welterweight era, he was beating D1 wrestlers. I think Kamaru is a pretty amazing wrestler and probably gives him the toughest fight of his career. The more I see of Kamaru, the more I'm impressed. And then over time, I think Kamaru keeps winning in this way. He has a major size advantage over someone like George and might just be able to outmuscle him for most of the fight, honestly. So I don't know. Yeah. It's a fun statistical comparison. I'll put it down below. What's your thoughts on George versus Kamaru Usman?
No, yeah, I think it's just one of those, like you say, he beats all these wrestlers, George St-Pierre, and then But like we said earlier, Kamaru Usman's never been taken down, so it probably plays out like maybe not as a barn burner as Colby versus Kamaru, but it'll
No.
probably play out on the feet. You know, you've got the more karate stance of GSP. I'd like to see Trevor Whitman try to figure out GSP at welterweight. You know, it's the battle of two minds. GSP at welterweight, yes, he got knocked out by Matt Serra, but you know, it is what it is. That's a once in a lifetime shot for Serra. But you know, I think George St-Pierre's striking was so good that he got people thinking about the striking, and then he just snatched up the double leg.
Yeah.
And he was rarely caught on the feet. Obviously, we saw him against Hendricks. That is what it is. But his striking is like we saw against Bisping. You know, that check left hook that he landed on Bisping
That's good.
His hands are good. You know, for me, you think of George St-Pierre, you think of the double jab takedown, or think like jab takedown, side kick. You know, keep his opponent at bay until he wants to actually engage. But I think Kamaru Usman would force him to engage, which would be something that we haven't seen out of George an awful lot, where he's having to be in a bit of a brawl. And you know, if Kamaru's setting the pace on him, he maybe does open himself up to be taken down. But at the same time, you know, 100% takedown defense in your UFC career is
insane.
It's insane, like you say. So it's, you know,
Yeah.
I think it's the matchup that sadly I don't think we'll ever get, because Usman's on an upward trajectory and St-Pierre is all but fully retired these days. So
and he's not in his prime anyway. But like you said with the Hendricks fight, I think George does struggle, and to a lesser extent, Nick Diaz does struggle a little bit against southpaws when striking. And Kamaru can very easily slip into southpaw on the feet. And the more time I see and the more Kamaru I get, I'm just thinking, man, Kamaru probably wins that fight if they're both in their prime. But
yeah,
51-49 kind of thing.
Yeah, exactly. It's a shame as well, because they're so close to being like, that fight really could have, you know, a few years here, and if GSP came a few years later and Usman came a few years earlier, we could probably get that fight. But it's like you say, the GSP's past his prime, and Usman is just, you know, he's going into he's lapping the field at welterweight at the moment. He's having to fight Masvidal twice, Covington twice, probably Edwards twice. So
yeah, the closest they ever got, like, they don't even have opponents in common. The closest opponent would be Jorge Masvidal, who did fight in Strikeforce, but could never fight Jake Shields. Like, he fought KJ Noons, who fought Nick Diaz, who fought, like, there's no, like, they clearly fought the same guy. There's no overlap.
Exactly.
But Masvidal's as close as you can get. Okay, but before we head out of here, there's no big UFCs this weekend, but there is a lot of other great shows, and MMA Sucka will have you folks covered. We have Battleground 2 this Friday, Bellator 264 this Friday, PFL 7 this Friday, Combate Global 17, CFFC 99, and Submission Underground. My name's Tim Wheaton. Check me out, Tim Wheaton MMA. We're going to put some links below for you folks. Frazer, tell us what we got going on this week, and where can we find more of you?
Yeah, we've got, like Tim just said, we've got all of those events this week. So we'll have previews for pretty much all of them, and we'll have live results for, again, all of them. We'll have staff picks for Bellator and PFL like we usually do. And then me and Tim will probably jump this time next week into looking forward to the I think it's Cannonier versus Gastelum's the next fight night card, which, you know, maybe we might need a few questions, because other than, I think, the main event, I think that card's pretty thin. But
yeah, that's fair.
Yeah, we'll figure out over the week what to do. We might, you know, check out our socials, MMA Sucka on Instagram and on Twitter, to keep an eye out. And yeah, be plenty on the site for you to check out. So
cheers, folks. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you very much.